Welcome, everyone. I'm Jeff Schreifels, and I'm principal and owner of Veritus Group, and I'm excited to be with you today. Before we get started with the conversation, there are a few items you should know about our webinar system. Your questions are really important to us, and we'll have some time dedicated for that, but you're welcome to submit your questions throughout the conversation. I'll be monitoring the questions, asking questions, so bear with me because I'm doing it all here. And so I'll be looking at the Q&A box. Please type all those questions in Q&A instead of the chat. Use the chat to talk amongst each other. If you have some real questions, use the Q&A box. And there's an option to submit your questions anonymously if you'd like, which you're welcome to use. And we encourage you to use the chat for conversations and connection because our goal here is to have this be a space for community. And as part of that, we're asking each of you to commit to making this a safe space where questions are welcome and we're working together to grow as leaders. So thank you for participating in this manner. And lastly, we'll be sending you a link to this recording, so be on the lookout for an email with that link. Now, I'm thrilled to welcome my special guest, Jessica Graham. She's founder of J. Graham Consulting, where for over the last 20 years, she has worked alongside corporate, nonprofit, and public sector organizations to partner with courageous leaders and teams navigating transition, complexity, and transformation. Jessica helps organizations lead with soul, strategy, and impact. Welcome, Jessica.
Thank you, Jeff. It's an honor to be here and to meet this wonderful group of people. So I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Yes, Jeff, I am in my first year as a solopreneur. And I think one of the things that I decided to do when I started my consulting practice, as you mentioned, is really bring together some of the best tips that I've seen. I spent about a decade in the tech space. So I worked with social impact teams at organizations like Google and Cisco. Had a chance to see leaders and executives in action in real time with teams of 50 or 500 or 5,000 even, and learn more about what makes leaders great and also how great leaders operate. Before I spent time in tech, I also spent 10 years in the nonprofit sector. I'm a proud AmeriCorps alum. I learned a lot through service, and I'm a big believer in servant leadership and human-centered leadership. And so really combining both of those distinct worlds, the philanthropic space and nonprofit organizations with high-performing teams in the tech space, is kind of the nexus of the work that I do now.
Mm-hmm. Well, we have a ton of leaders and future leaders on this call. So today's call is going to be a little different from our usual webinars. We're not going to have slides. Instead, we're going to be chatting about leadership and leadership in many different ways, whether it's in crisis or transition, and some of those challenges leaders are facing right now and how you can address those and strategies that are going to support you as a leader in this time and environment. So, Jessica, start us off. Why don't you share with our audience about your frameworks of organizational hygiene and what you call the triple C's?
Sure, Jeff. I can start with the triple C's. The three C's stand for clarity, courage, and care, and really looking to explore and support leaders in developing a leadership practice that is clear and has clarity. That comes from a place of courageous leadership and is centered around care for themselves as humans and also care for the people that they're leading. So the Triple C framework has a lot of applications. I can get into more details about that if you'd like.
Yeah.
And then we couple that part of clarity and courage and care is organizational hygiene, right? Creating the structures where healthy teams thrive and high-performing teams really work well. And I use the term hygiene to refer to something that we all do every day, hopefully, like brushing our teeth, right, Jeff?
Yeah.
There's just a basic expectation that there's some things that you should do to maintain great hygiene of, in this case, an organization. And while you do also brush your teeth every day, we also typically go to the dentist once, maybe twice a year for regular cleanings. That is a baseline expectation. In absence of daily hygiene and kind of quarterly hygiene, perhaps, you may end up in the dentist office with a root canal. You may have a very painful intervention. And I've seen teams go through these spaces sometimes where there's a lot of dysfunction in the team. There's a lot of pain in the team. Teams are not thriving and delivering results. And some of that could be because there's been a lack of attention to organizational hygiene and the basic premises that need to happen to create a
Yeah.
healthy, care-centered environment in the workplace.
Yeah. Why don't we start with that first, the organizational hygiene part, and talk about what that means? And I really I feel like many organizations that would say they're in crisis could probably prevent a lot of that if they practice this hygiene that you're talking about. Why don't you go through what does that mean? What do you do to have this organizational hygiene?
Yeah, some of it is probably already happening, or perhaps not. We'll hear from the audience.
Yeah.
I would say an annual recast of the vision and the strategic priorities is really essential. Once a year, at a minimum, from the highest levels of leadership, really communicating this is our purpose. These are the strategies that we will accomplish to deliver our purpose. This is your role in that purpose, and creating
Yeah.
space for people to ask questions. I think that's essential.
I think that's really good. We often think, oh, well, everyone knows our vision. It's on our website, or it's on our wall. But I think going through that every year and remembering why we're doing what we're doing and where we're going,
Hmm.
and really sitting down and talking through that, it's something that's really needed because in the day to day of our work, we forget about stuff. We forget about it. Like, why are we doing this again? And
Yeah.
so I think that's really good that at least once a year, we're refreshing and thinking about what is our vision.
Yes, absolutely. And keep in mind, the larger the team, the more important and essential this is, right? When
Yeah.
you're maybe a team of five and you're all in the same time zone, maybe you feel that it's not as needed. And I would say it is, but you may feel it's not. When you're an organization of 1,000 people in eight different time zones or 80,000 people, right? This is what we see in corporate Fortune 100 companies is they actually
Yeah.
cannot afford to have the lack of clarity because everything you're saying is getting translated in 18, 20 languages, right? You
Yeah.
have to be extremely clear and you're constantly changing who's on the team. Right.
Yeah.
So it's not like I'm repeating something I already said. It's an acknowledgement that the people that work for me have changed and they
Yeah.
deserve my job as a leader. They deserve an opportunity to hear from me what our goal is, what our North Star is.
Yeah.
So that's important, I think.
Awesome. Well, keep going. Tell us more about this. What other hygiene basics do we need?
Yeah, I would say on top of that, I would do something quarterly. And maybe that's more around celebration of the team and acknowledging bright spots of innovation, people who've gone above and beyond. You want to create a culture
Yeah.
where excellence is recognized and celebrated, and you're leading from a place of excellence. And so if you have a quarterly moment, maybe virtual, right? And an all hands meeting, we're all probably perhaps imagining before COVID, we all fly in, we've got to be, it's expensive, we got to spend all this money, we got to feed everyone. You can do it all online. You can
Mm.
do your all hands retreat just like you and I are talking with 500 people or with 50
Mhm.
people, right? And so it doesn't necessarily have to be a huge investment of capital resources, although I do think it's important to consider that after we get through the quarterly. Let me pause because I said the quarterly thing around excellence and celebration. Honoring people's humanity, right? We talk about
Mm.
equity and inclusion. You may want to take a quarterly focus on a particular region of your
Yeah.
team, right? Let's shout
Yeah.
out the East Coast team. Let's shout out the West Coast team, right? Let's shout out the UK team, right? People love that. And it's a real
Hmm.
part of people feeling seen. That's one of those non-monetary compensation things that
Yeah.
really change the game for people who and retain talent for them to feel I have a future here and my
Mhm.
work has been acknowledged.
Yeah. Um, Tell me more about virtual retreats that you can do with people. What are some of those things that you recommend?
Yeah, I would say the culture of the organization, it really should inform this. So some people may like to do just a 2 hour virtual Zoom session. Um,
Okay.
expand it and have breakout groups.
Hmm.
Many facilitators, probably many on the call, where you can facilitate small group discussions. You can say, this is strategic priority number one. Now we're going to send you to small groups and you're going to talk about those priorities and come back. Um, it's the basics of like a company meeting, right?
Hmm.
I presented to a company meeting with 10,000 people joining live, right?
Yeah.
You don't know who's on the other side of that.
Yeah.
And it's an important practice. Giving, I think the key being bidirectional conversation, right? Just
Yeah.
try very hard. And I know we're going to take time for questions to not have it be a lecture, right? You want to aspire to some way for people to co-create the agenda, probably meeting with your leadership team and helping them co-create, allowing them to say, well, my staff would like to hear this. You can do a poll and say, what are you
Hmm.
hoping our founder is going to address today? And then you can reveal the results of the poll. Wow, 80% of you had a question that was this. I will be answering that, right? Again, you can have structured choice. It doesn't mean that you're held captive by the masses of what people want, but as a leader, you should be responsive and you should be accountable to the people that you're leading. And I think that's one of the early ways to demonstrate that collaboration.
Yeah. That's so good for all of us leaders here on this call to think about, even within your own team, how often are you coming together with your team doing this framework of, creating this idea that, our jobs are so stressful, we're busy, and we often don't take the time to come together and learn from one another, reset expectations, go through that vision. And it might not be company wide all the time, but it can be within your teams as well. And that you're doing that, at least twice a year, maybe quarterly, that you're working with your individual teams and really giving people the space to talk, to give their input. I just don't see it happening a lot with a lot of the nonprofits that we've seen. And so putting some of this into your yearly practice with what you're doing with your teams is incredibly important.
Yeah, I agree. And I think when you look at when it falls apart, Jeff, it becomes really clear.
Yeah.
I get called in to consult and work,
Yeah.
and they go, "Oh my God, that something's wrong. Our impact is being affected by some internal team dynamics, right?" A lot of times, what it could have been clarified. I think 80 to 90% of organizational hygiene issues are a lack of clarity, right? You have a
Yeah.
CEO who was like, I literally want to stop doing that program and we're going to do this other program. But somehow that didn't get communicated.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now people are really, really distraught. And what's happening? Why are we making these changes? I don't understand, right? So I think it comes back to really communicating with clarity. This is what we're doing. And also, right now, more than ever, Jeff, in moments of crisis, when you have an unexpected reality that you have to respond to,
Hmm.
it's helpful to communicate your thought process. And I'm not saying all things, there are things that leaders may not be able to share with the entire team, but to
Yeah.
share, here is how we're going to go about preserving our organization in the midst of a financial crisis, in the midst of a withdrawal of many of our funders. And
Yeah.
knowledge is power, right? And so many
Yeah.
people may not have the same information that the leadership team has. So you want to think about democratizing access to information
Hmm.
and where possible, not freaking everybody out, but where
Hmm.
possible, being
Yeah.
honest,
Yeah.
acknowledging we're talking about adult workers who have consented to be in the workplace, right? So these are people who have agency and should be encouraged to action that agency. I think candor and clarity is a basic premise to acknowledging the agency of all workers in workspaces.
Yeah. Very good point. Speaking of clarity, that's number one of your triple C's. So
Yes.
let's get into that. And I'd love for you to go through what those triple C's are and what it means and how it can apply to having better teams and a better organization.
Yeah. One more thing that is about clarity as well as organizational hygiene. I'm a big fan of skip level meetings at whatever
Oh,
cadence works for your organization,
tell me,
right?
what does skip level mean?
So let's say I'm an entry-level fundraiser and I report to my manager of fundraising. I'm like a fundraising coordinator.
Yeah.
My manager of fundraising reports to the director of major gifts.
Yeah.
We want to create a pathway by which that entry-level fundraising coordinator has some connection with the director of major gifts.
Awesome. I love
Right.
that.
Right. And so this is because we want to treat this as a normative, positive behavior, an act of clarity, care for that director of major gifts to hear from frontline staff what their questions are, what they're
Yes.
struggling with. Now, they're going to hear that from that middle manager for sure, but we want to trust and verify.
Mm-hmm. I
Right.
love
So this
that.
is
Yes.
not framing it as like you're in trouble or I heard you said something about me.
Yeah.
You don't want to wait for it to get to that point. You want to preventatively say, I want to know the people who work for me once a year or twice a year. You will have an opportunity to have a 15-minute one-on-one with me. Whatever, however you want to structure it, right? You can go
Yeah.
shallow, you can go deep, but I think there's a lot to be said for the intelligence that will come from the front line when people are able to use the words that reflect their lived experience
Yeah. Yeah.
directly to leadership. And that's going to then inform your annual retreat as well. It's going to help
Yeah.
the leader be more clear with the words that you're leading and using.
And what a great culture that's going to create when you do that, in your organization. If you have those, I love that whole idea of the skip level meeting. I hadn't thought about that before, but that's really important.
Yeah. And sometimes you may have to reorganize an organization, right? And so as a leader, you want to have some proximity to the people that work for you. You may realize, oh, that leader actually shouldn't be managing that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
We all have
Yeah.
self-awareness growth areas.
We have a question that came in. This will be interesting for you to answer. What are a few key annual retreat agenda components you recommend to nurture high performing teams?
I think looking at the visions, particularly for mission-driven organizations,
Yeah.
a lot of organizations tweak their language of their mission. Words really matter. And so you can get a lot out of people saying, yes, I love this part of our mission, or actually our funders hate this part of our mission, and we get a ton of questions about it. I mean, that might be interesting to hear. So that's one thing.
Hmm.
I think another piece is smart goal setting.
Tell me more.
Have you familiar with the SMART goals
Not,
acronym?
no, no.
Okay, I did not create this. It is in the public domain. Specific, measurable, actionable, relevant, and time bound.
Okay.
So you want to have a vision, which could be, in 2030 and
Yeah.
2025, but you also want to have SMART goals, which is kind of like one layer down from strategies, right?
Yeah.
You have your strategies, and so often
Hmm.
we're talking about the strategic level. You want to make sure the strategies align to specific and measurable time bound deliverables. And so
Yeah. I
you want
love
to
that.
set that at your C suite or your leadership team level, and that's going to then flow down to
Yeah.
the rest of the organization. When I was at Google, for example, there was a really cool tool that we used where you could see all the way up your reporting chain, and you could see the CFO's goals, and you could see the VP of real estate team's goals, and then you wrote your goals to align to the leadership team you were in. And of course, this is in consultation with your manager and your
Yeah.
leader, but this is a great calibration exercise that you might kick off at an annual retreat. You might also realize nobody has any goals at all. We're all just
Yeah.
doing our, God's honest best, and that is not a recipe for high performing teams.
Hmm. Love that. Great answer to that. Okay. Now, are we ready for the triple C's? I jumped the gun
Yes.
on you.
No, no, it's good. I would say it takes courage, right? So we have clarity. And again, I just want to say clarity requires courage,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Courage to sometimes confront,
Hmm.
right? Maybe there's something occurring within your deliverables that is out of alignment with the mission of the organization. You might be terrified to say, hey, I know you asked me to work with this funder, but I found out that this funder is doing, and
Yeah.
I just wanted you to know, right? That is terrifying to say
Yeah.
that, but it does take courage to do that. I think a lot of fundraisers are often in that position, which is a tough position to be in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or to be able to say, I know we agreed on this fundraising deliverable. In light of the current landscape, I need to have a conversation about how this might change.
Yeah.
Um, I need your help, right? Help me find a new $5 million shortfall from the federal government, right? Like, would you please help me
Right.
figure this out, right? Because I think that's a reasonable question to ask one's manager if that is the case. But it will take courage to say that. And of course, as a leader, you have to have the courage to invite that and to not
Right.
avoid your team for 5 months because you're so busy that you don't have time to talk to people. That's
Hmm.
not going to bring clarity to the furtherance of the mission. So the courage,
Right.
clarity are hand in hand.
Yes. Okay. And then as we've been talking, that clarity also requires good communication
Yes, there are some
constantly.
silent C's. Yes.
Yeah.
So we've got clarity, and the silent thing is the communication. So inherent in clarity is the communication. And you can do quick audits. You can ask yourself, have I been talking to people? Do I only talk to one person just because that feels more comfortable for me? Why is that? Do I have a preference for how I communicate? I have a leader I'm coaching right now who's extremely written oriented and prefers a lot of reflection time,
Yeah.
which is fine. That's great. She's a very thorough person. Most of her thoughts are really well thought out. It also means, though, if her staff ask her a question in the moment, she kind of stalls out. And sometimes that doesn't feel good for their staff who are looking for direction in real time, right? So
Yeah.
you want to at least communicate that and then have the structures to support that communication. So for that leader, I recommend it to her staff. If you need a decision from your leader, please provide 24 hours notice as much as possible. And when not, you know, she set
Yeah.
her own protocol for like crisis moments that they need an immediate response for. But like most of the time, you should be able to say, I need a decision from you by tomorrow at the latest. And that leader will then have the time to think about it and get back to you.
That's really good because I think I just think of all the different scenarios just in my own company or I've seen in other nonprofits that kind of clarity around communication style if you understood that well, it could alleviate a lot of problems. There's like, well, why did she say it that? And we just in our work with donors, we're often asking the major gift officer or the mid-level officer to ask donors how do they like to be communicated with. And if we can determine that, that's the primary way we're trying to communicate. And when we see that happen, you see response from donors at a really high level because we're honoring what they want. And I feel like if we actually did that within our teams, they would feel honored that everyone kind of knows, well, if we want to get anything done, you've got to text this person. Like I know like our director of finance, for some reason, like if you email him, it takes forever to hear back. But if I text him, he's on it. And so what I've done is when I email him, I'll email the big long thing and then I'll text him and say, "Hey, I sent you an email that outlines this. Go read that." And everything gets done much quicker because I know now his communication style.
Yeah.
Um, and it really, because other people are calling me like, "Why doesn't he ever get back to me?" I said, "Have you been texting or emailing him?" And they said, "Well, I sent this email like 3 days ago." I said, "You got to text him." It's just the way
Well,
it is.
and kudos to you for having the time to care about your colleague and your CFO and like meeting him in the middle, right?
Yeah,
I think that's a
yeah,
great example of the kind of thing you'd address in the annual retreat as well, right? Or in
yeah,
the quarterly retreat or
yeah,
there may also, I think the relationship you have with donors is probably going to be a little bit different than you have with staff and peers. And so
yes,
maybe a moment where you say, I know you, I had someone working for me. She said, I don't like email ever. And I prefer not to work from 9 a.m. to noon. I like only heads down time and I don't want to be emailed. And we were in a team whose job it was to support a global organization of like all these time zones. And I said, I appreciate your personal preference, but I want to name that that is a personal preference.
yeah,
You're going to have to help me understand how you can deliver services to your portfolio of 50 different stakeholders in 3 different time zones while also not responding to any emails for the first 3 hours of the day.
Yeah.
And that made it very clear. It took some courage for me to say to that member of the team, I understand this is what you would like in a perfect world. I don't think the deliverables you're accountable for can allow that. Right. So then we can have a compromise. We can talk about, okay, maybe you have 9 to 10 as your sacred hour, but an expectation that you're responding to emails after that point, because that's what's going to get you the delivery of the goals that you were hired
Yeah.
to do.
Yeah. Here's a question that came in. What tips do you have for managing up and bringing clarity?
hmm Proactive managing up, I think, is the way to go. All of the people who mentored me, any successes I've had with managers I've reported to, it's in proactive managing up and giving your leader the opportunity to skim it. They'll let you know what they want to go deeper on or what their questions are. I would not interpret no response as anything other than that person might be busy, right?
Hmm.
So I would say in managing up, maybe another tip might be to calibrate expectations around responsiveness.
Hmm.
Um, and to assume positive intent that your
Yeah.
leader is not rude, your leader
Yes.
is not ignoring you proactively. Your leader may be in back-to-back meetings for 6 hours. Your leader may be talking to another member of the team who has a different issue that's more urgent or pressing, right?
Hmm.
And those would be my first two tips. I don't know, Jeff, if that resonates with you.
Yeah, it does. And I think it will resonate with Liza too, who asked that question.
Yeah, let's see if Liza has
Um,
a follow up to it. 'Cause
yeah. She said leadership above her is frequently tempted to pivot, add, consider in a way that reduces clarity and adds stress.
Mm,
So, so then that goes to, okay, so around clarity then comes courage. I think courage also is something that prevents us from, well, another one of those small C's is confront.
mhm.
And, I know in my history, it's hard, it's not easy to do, to confront people. And it does take courage. It's like, there's a problem and you'd rather like avoid than to like deal with it because it's hard and it's going to be uncomfortable. Do you have any good stories of how people have decided, okay, I've got to have the courage to do this, and they went ahead and it changed and it was difficult, but usually out of this difficult thing that we do, good things come out of it.
Yeah, yeah. I think it might start with, compassion for self and really understanding that you're already courageous if you are a fundraiser
Yeah,
who's looking for a change-based organization, right? So
yeah,
you've chosen a profession whose definition of success is engaging people to contribute monetarily to change, to
yeah.
equity, to systems change, right? To something that it is not being addressed by the private sector, perhaps,
Hmm.
perhaps because there's no profit to be made in that work,
Right,
right? It takes
right.
courage to work for an organization who's doing work that other people don't necessarily want to do.
Hmm.
That's meeting a need that's important to the community, that's meeting a need that maybe um, brings us into the future that we envision, right? So nonprofit organizations by design oftentimes are standing in that gap. And that's
Hmm.
a courageous space to start from. So I would start with just like
Okay.
affirming,
Yeah,
I'm
that's
already a
good.
courageous person. I've made a courageous choice
Yeah.
by being here. And then with that, aligning to the values, taking a stand on a philosophical view is an act of courage that should hopefully be aligned to the mission of the organization, right? If
Hmm.
your organization's mission, perhaps I saw someone from the music chamber, and I was a kid violinist. If your whole mission is bringing music to people as an act of mental health and like helping people have enjoyment in their life and thrive. I mean, that's amazing and beautiful. And also, you should be doing that with each other
Yeah.
in your own workspaces. So I don't know if that answers the question, Jeff.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that it does. You have the courage to confront, but you also have the courage to really take a step back and think about maybe the strategy for that, like the timing.
Hmm.
So just because you have the thought the first time doesn't mean you need to say it right away. Maybe you
Yeah.
have the courage to talk to a peer, or you have the courage to confide in someone, bounce the idea, hey, I was thinking this. Have you ever thought that? And really kind of bolster yourself up to say the thing that needs to be said, to move in a closer direction to clarity.
Hmm. Yeah. Okay, so we talked about clarity. We talked about um
Oh, I have one more for courage. Sorry.
okay.
Feedback. Feedback takes courage.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. And maybe many organizations have 360 feedback loops and different things like that, but that's yeah, that's
Yeah, and so one of the
definitely
things we're
takes courage.
seeing in the human resources industry is like a more frequency around feedback, right? So it used
Yeah,
to be the standard corporate thing was like once a year you get feedback.
right.
Way in the past. That's it's just too late. You cannot afford
Yeah,
to have someone being incompetent or not meeting their deliverables for a whole year and then tell them at the end of the year, right? You have to tell
yeah,
them. Quarterly is better. I've even seen organizations do weekly feedback loops. And this is not, of course, around like deliverables, but just like visibility more so.
yeah,
Um, so I think you want to set a protocol. You want to be clear with your organization. And maybe for someone who's struggling with like leadership decisions, that would be feedback you could provide to your leadership. Here's how the decision that was communicated to me, how it affected my ability to deliver and how it affected my stress levels, which gets us to
hmm,
care, which is another C. We'll get to that one.
okay. Yeah,
But I think that feedback loop is really important, and creating a culture where feedback is not viewed as punitive is very, very important. And a lot of organizations struggle with this. People hear the word feedback and they think I'm in trouble, or they
hmm,
think I'm going to get reamed. This is something that I want to avoid at all costs. That is not the culture of a high performing team. I'm not a sports person, but I'm a big Valkyries fan. Go Valkyries. Can you imagine those women not watching any reels of their performance on the court, of their coach not giving them tips on, hey, that's how you shot that ball. I want you to do it this way differently in practice. Can you imagine if they didn't even meet in the locker room to talk
yes,
about what they needed from each other? I mean, that would be insane. Obviously, you have to come together and share feedback, but you want to connect the feedback to success. And so I think also giving feedback that's positive, not just negative, using
yeah,
the sandwich model. I love your glasses, Jeff. You're so attentive as a presenter. Thank you so much for hosting me, right? That's feedback too. Feedback's not
mhm,
just bad, feedback is
yeah,
positive.
yeah. Here's a question that just came in. What advice do you have for managers who are giving feedback to direct reports that need to focus on areas of improvement?
Yeah, I'm going to go to the third C, that's care.
Okay.
I think a leadership framework that has clarity and courage must be complemented with care. You should care about your team. You should care about their professional goals. Most people are not going to retire from being your direct report. Most of
Yeah.
the time, right? They're going to have a different job after you. What is that job? What are their aspirations? Do you even know?
Hmm.
Are you coaching them in alignment to that future aspiration? That's
Yeah.
that's a great way to frame the feedback. I know you're looking to pursue a PhD in this field. This feedback and your performance in this role is going to be something that's going to show up in your ability to continue in this field, right? So this is not just
Yeah.
specific to this role. It's about you growing and thriving as a professional in this field. As managers, we're all building our own portfolio of leadership, right?
Mhm.
People talk all the time about their favorite manager.
Yeah.
Are you going to be that person? Do you want to be that person? Right. And so I think if you care about your people, you know a little bit about their personal lives. Obviously, people have the option to disclose or not disclose. But if you're starting with vulnerability about yourself and disclosing a little bit about yourself, oftentimes it will create the environment, given the power dynamics of managers, it will create the environment where other people will share things about themselves as
Hmm.
well. And now you have a framework to better understand the person that you're providing feedback to and aligning it to what's going to help them, what's going to help them be less stressed out.
Hmm.
have more clarity, right? I care about you having clarity, Liza. I care about you and your stress levels. Let's have a conversation about how your goals can align to more clarity so that you're less stressed out.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really good. Okay, so when you're dealing with issues, you often were talking you've when we were talking before preparing for this, you talked about, okay, you're asking me, is that a clarity, is that a courage or a care issue? How do you use that?
I would use it as a diagnostic,
Okay.
right? So just ask yourself, is this a clarity issue, a courage issue, or a care issue? Um, let's say I'm a fundraiser and I do not know what my fundraising target is. That's
Yeah.
that's a clarity issue.
Yeah.
Maybe I've been given two different numbers and they are different. That's a clarity issue.
Yeah.
And maybe
Yeah.
there's not a timeline. That's a clarity issue. Now you have to have courage to ask the question, but at its core, that is a clarity issue.
Yes.
Let's say you have a fundraising target that you know you will not, you and your team, let's say you're a middle manager, you're leading
Yeah.
a group of fundraisers, you know you and your team are not likely. You have your projections, you got your pipeline, you are clearly, a couple donors fell out, right? So the pipeline updates. You're like, oh,
Yeah.
I need to either find, go find a billionaire tomorrow or we're not going to hit this target.
Yeah.
Right. I actually think that's also a clarity issue because what it says to me is that you want to clarify and manage up. Here's what's going on in the field.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So that's just communicating because clarity, remember, the silent C to clarity is communication. So that's just communicating. Here's how our reality has changed. And sometimes you got to tell the board, right? You approved a 3-year strategic plan. One of your pillars or
Mhm.
strategic outcomes is no longer possible in light of the current
Yeah.
reality. We did not anticipate
Right.
X happening, and therefore we have to be clear with the board about what has changed since they approved that 3-year strategic plan.
Hmm. Yeah, that's really good. It just dawned on me that the work that we do with the nonprofits, one of the big parts of the Veritas Way is providing the structure for major gift officers to do their work so that they know exactly what they're doing with every one of their donors in their portfolio throughout the whole course of the year. They know what their revenue goals are, and everyone knows. Everyone knows what their goals are, what by month, everything. And when they get in there and start working that, and their managers also see into it, it it really creates this clarity that they've never had before, and it clears up so much like confusion and what happens if we don't, and you can ask better questions, like let's say it's half the month is gone and the goal for the month was $100,000 in revenue and you're only at 15,000 and you're at half the you can have better you can ask better questions at that point, like, okay, what's happening here? Rather than 3 months later, and you're like, wait a minute, we didn't hit our goal. What happened? Though,
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like
yeah,
having that structure and set up like that prevents a lot of communication problems. It helps with clarity. It really helps the relationship between the frontline fundraiser, the manager, the executive team, and everyone because everyone's aware of what's happening.
yes. And it facilitates education, right?
Yeah.
Managing, I think someone asked that question. It facilitates an
Mhm.
opportunity to say, this is how it works, right? Because your major gifts people are experts in their field. They may be reporting to executive directors or CEOs who are not as familiar with the cycles of fundraising, with the language of donors, the sometimes caginess of donors. Okay, well, the meeting got pushed out 6 weeks. That's a clear signal. Or it's an ask for help.
Yeah.
If you can go meet with that donor, if you can get that meeting on the calendar, if you can move it up 2 weeks, I think it will really help our process and our fundraising cycle, right? So sometimes it's
Yeah.
transparency and clarity is kind. Clarity is kind. That's like one of my mantras that I just have practiced in my life overall. And I think workplaces would be better if people would just take the time to be clear. But you do have to have time, right? And so if you don't have the structure, to your point, it sounds like Veritas is coaching people. You have to have the structure. When are
Yeah.
your meeting times? How much time are you meeting? If it's only a half hour in the car, there's going to be a different outcome than maybe that full hour long review the pipeline together and
Yeah.
talk about it in real time.
Yeah. Well, our client experience leaders are work when they work with a fundraiser, they meet with them every week for an hour
Oh,
to
wow.
basically go over like, here's what you said you were going to do last week. Were you able to complete that? If not, what happened so that we can, what do we need to do next week?
Mm.
Where can I help you over here? Giving them some encouragement, hey, you
Yeah.
did great with this donor, so that meeting with them every week is so key because we're walking alongside of them and that we find that they're much more successful if you have that ongoing communication like that because they have the plan, they know what they're doing, but then every week being able to help walk alongside of them to work that plan correctly, uh, it it completely changes. So we get this feedback from fundraisers going, "This has completely changed my life. My whole career has changed because I used to be going over here doing this, going over here doing this, trying to explain to my boss what I was doing." And now they have this structure where everyone knows what's going on. If there's a issue, it's already dealt with because we're meeting every week, so it doesn't become an issue. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and if there's a little, things are going south, we immediately like, here's what's happening. This donor can no longer give this gift in March. It looks like it's going to come in May. That's a big deal to be able to proactively talk about those things rather than wait until you have to try to conjure up the courage to
Yeah.
tell your boss, we're not
Yeah.
going to get this gift.
Yeah.
You
That's
know?
incredible. I love that you're talking about creating the structures. What I heard, Jeff, and correct me if I'm wrong, I heard that you care.
Yeah. Well,
I
yes.
heard that you care about
Yeah.
your clients, you care about supporting your clients, you care about helping the members of Veritus Group get time, right? There's
That's right.
that's the only
But
reason.
this is what we're talking about is what all good managers should be doing, right? They should be providing that clarity, the ability to be courageous and show compassion and always showing care towards their people. And if they were really doing that, we wouldn't see the turnover and the burnout that we've been seeing. You know, every 15 months, there's just a huge amount of turnover in nonprofit fundraising. And when you see that happen, when people are not staying in their jobs, then relationships with donors suffer because there's always someone new trying to establish a relationship with a donor. And just when it gets going again, they're leaving, you
Yeah.
know?
Why do you have any insight into why you think the turnover is like that?
Well, I think it has a lot to do with what we've been talking about. And that's why, and quite frankly, that's why a lot of organizations hire us to come in
Mhm.
because they don't have the management infrastructure or philosophy that managers are even important, which they're very important, but we don't value it. And we probably don't value it in the for-profit or the nonprofit world that as much. But especially in the nonprofit world, we don't value management very well. Um, and therefore, we hire people to do these specific jobs and like, here's your portfolio, go out and raise $3 million. Instead, hey, we have all this, we're going to train you well, we're going to treat you well, we're going to give you a portfolio of donors that's reasonable, we're going to give you that structure, and you're going to you're going to be meeting with your manager and their job is to make you successful. Wow, that would be huge for a frontline fundraiser to come into a place like that. Oftentimes they're thrown into it. And that's a big need for burnout. That happens. I mean, that's when burnout happens. That's when people don't like their managers, then they leave.
Hmm. Yeah. I,
Here's a question that came up. Do you have any advice or best practices for how to work with, manage up a manager who has simply said, I'm here to fundraise, and has made it clear that they are only worried about working their own portfolio rather than supporting their direct reports? This, Jessica, happens all the time in the
mhm,
nonprofit sector. So you have a manager or director of major gifts or mid level, but they also have a portfolio of donors. The manager does.
mhm, mhm.
And that's always going to take precedent because, there's a revenue goal. That's their number one thing. And then they also have to like manage their direct reports, and that usually falls to the wayside. So, do you have any advice for, that's where the courage is going to have, come into. But yeah, we see this a lot where fundraisers need that advice. Like, how do I talk to my manager to get management?
It's so tough. I will say, as we're talking through this, I'm realizing like so many of the most amazing fundraisers I've met and worked with are
Yeah,
completely self-starters. They take such huge amounts of initiative. They find problems and fix problems before anyone finds out about them. They're like delivering results on a shoestring budget, and sometimes that passion and skill can be exploited. And
yeah,
that's unfortunate. And I think in a way, because successful fundraisers are such competitive talent, that's part of the attrition issue, right? You're like, I can go anywhere. I can raise $2 million for you. I can also raise $2 million for them over there. So if you're going to act crazy, I will take my talents somewhere else. So we do have that marketplace. And I would encourage, people who are in a leadership position to understand, and they probably do, the best and brightest talent are going to go to the places where their needs are being met.
not enough, I would say.
Yeah.
Leadership doesn't value that enough.
Yeah.
And so they do let good fundraisers go, and
And
not give them what they need to succeed. Um, it's a very frustrating thing in our industry. It's You're right though. The best major gift officers are self-starters. They figure out things, but they also need support. They need training, they support, and they need to be told they're doing a good job.
absolutely. And I agree with that 100%. And so I hope I didn't sound like I was
No,
disagreeing with
no,
that.
no, you didn't.
I
No.
absolutely agree. I guess it was more, if the individual who was asking the question, my initially thought was this is a clarity issue. If your manager said, I'm absolutely not managing you, I mean, at a certain point as a professional, it's a free market. You have to sit with that reality and make the decision that's best for you, right? Because the decision that's best for you may not be to persist in an environment where you have a disengaged manager or someone who doesn't value that, right? So I think that's starting there. But the other piece is I wonder if there's, and I learned this too, reporting to people in global environments, is how can I make it easy for my leader to make a decision? How can I package information? So
Yes.
there's like an executive summary, and there's an option A, which I think is the best because of these three reasons. And there's option B or C if you want to know, and I need a decision by this date. Are there ways that you can
Mhm.
elevate things to leadership that in essence demonstrate your leadership?
Yeah.
And that leader starting to feel like, oh, every time I talk to this person, I make like three decisions really quickly and we move through stuff. Let's keep meeting, let's keep talking, right? And so some of it might be, I don't know, I think sometimes it might be, does meeting with this person feel like it's really, and I hate to say this, but is this a person that's going to spend the entire time we meet talking about what I need, or are they talking about what the team needs?
Hmm.
Right? And so there's a balance, right?
Yeah.
being
Yeah.
a good professional in my experience, the people I have tried, the leader I've tried to be, and the person I've tried to be in the workplace has always been to think of like what I need, Jessica, but also what does the team need? And wherever possible, framing my needs as a furtherance of team needs.
Yeah.
And so some of that is language and nuance. Fundraisers tend to be really good at this, with the exception of if you get kind of triggered and pissed off. Sometimes it feels a little personal. And so you're like, of all the things that I do and all the money I brought in, this person had the audacity to say they're not even going to have a one-on-one with me once a month. I mean, I cannot believe it. You're not wrong. That is hurtful. And it begs the question, is this an environment you want to be in long term? Having said that,
Right.
to survive the environment that you're in, those would be my tips and recommendations. Just manage up, be very explicit, and really think about how to frame your needs in connection to the needs of the team, right? You can use words like I care. It's very clear that the board wants us to do X.
Hmm.
Here is what I need from you in order to do that thing, right?
Yeah.
That I don't know if that helps or answers the question at all.
I think it helped. I do think, to the person asking this question, it will take your courage to confront your manager, but you're going to do it just like a manager would do to you with care, right? You're going to take care in how you confront your manager. But I think it would be a gift to your manager to be able to do that, to say those things, because they need to know that. And they might realize, yeah, my team is struggling. I don't have the time because someone else is telling me I have to perform with this portfolio, and they don't seem to care so much for the people, but I see as a manager they're struggling. We've got to do something. We need help, and
Yeah.
we need to be able to take care of them, or we're going to have this turnover problem, and turnover is expensive.
Do the numbers. I mean,
Yeah.
let the numbers tell the story. And I do think, as someone who's been a manager and a director, I think you want to try to not make it feel like a confrontation. I do want to say that on the record. I don't recommend emailing your manager and saying like, I'd like to confront you with the truth. Jessica Graham said I should do this in a webinar. I would not be recommending like that language. I think it's more about providing clarity. I would like to share something with you. I care about our team's deliverables. I'm not sure if you're aware. This is how it's affecting me. Is it possible for us to do it this way, which is a little bit different than what you asked for? And I'm just curious, right? These are the words that I think will help provide clarity and get a little bit more information while
Yeah.
also not centering it in confrontation. I think the word confrontation I was using was more the role of the leader.
Yeah.
For that manager, I would actually say, for the manager who said, I'm not doing any management with you, I would coach that manager to talk to their C-suite executive and say, I don't feel good about this. You've given me
Yeah.
4 direct reports and I actually have zero time to manage them. And I just feel like I would be negligent in my duties as a caring professional if I didn't ask you, can we create time for me to manage the team that you've given me?
Yeah.
So that's where that's a little bit more of an appropriate confrontation with clarity. I think that's some nuance there, if that makes sense.
Well, one of the things we were talking about in our prep meeting was having compassion for leaders. So this question also that brings up, how to kind of go, we have to think about how are we going into that conversation with the manager, right? Or the leader. And we come from a place of compassion going, obviously, this person, my manager, is getting a lot of pressure coming from that place of empathy and not like, oh, they're a terrible person because they don't want to manage. They're not giving me what I need, but maybe something's going on with that person too. So coming from that place of compassion is also important.
Yeah. And hopefully you have it, right? There are situations where you just don't have it in you, and you have to be honest with yourself. But hopefully you can get there and say, like, I'm a human, I have a home life, I have external pressures on me. That individual does too. and really lean into that. It's
Yeah.
easy to not care. It's easy to say, well, they're my boss, so they're clearly getting paid more money than me. Like, why should I care about them? That's your decision to make, right? We're all, again, we all have agency. We all get to
Yeah.
choose the thoughts that we have. I think if you're looking for human-centered outcomes and you want to have a durable career in the philanthropy space, it is a skill set that you will want to develop. Compassion for self,
Yeah.
and then also compassion for others, which would be your manager as well as donors.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we have just a couple of minutes left, and I'm just wondering if you have any parting words of wisdom you can give us as leaders here or aspiring leaders um, to take with us before we leave.
Clarity is kind. And triple C is a framework that is both a guide and a diagnostic. So
Yeah.
reach out and let me know if you all are using it or if it's helpful. I would just say scenario planning, Jeff, would be my parting thing. It is such a difficult time for many organizations, and I
Yeah.
like having the clarity of mind and the courage to take a step back and say, let's look at scenario A, B, and C. Let's let the data inform what our options are and have a transparent conversation about that. If you have not done that as a fundraising team in the year 2025, I would be shocked and would highly recommend that you do some scenario planning.
That would be great. How do people get a hold of you?
You can go to my website. It's jg.consulting. So just my initials, jg.consulting. Or you can find me on LinkedIn. You can add me. I'd be happy to talk to people. I do half-hour consulting for free with anybody who's interested in having a conversation. So thank you for the opportunity, Jeff.
It's been so good to have you on. And thank you, everyone, for being with us today and for sharing your great questions. Thank you, Jessica, for joining me. We'll share more about how you can connect with Jessica if you didn't hear what you just said in all of our follow-up emails. You'll also get easy information on how Veritus can partner with you to understand where you have opportunities with your fundraising program. We look forward to partnering with you in your leadership journey. So thank you and take care.